Marion?
All right, thanks, Leo, and happy to be here. And good morning, everyone. Yeah, so as Leo mentioned, I'm from MYOB, so I'll just gonna be what I really plan today is just to have a short walkthrough of what the construction edition looks like. Right. So I'm assuming that everyone can see my screen at the moment.
All good, mate.
All right, awesome. Right. So what we have here, so as if you've seen through the slides, MYOB Advanced, a completely cloud-based system. Right. So there's nothing for you to install on the device. As long as you have an active internet connection and you have a browser on your device, you should be able to access your site as long as you have the authorization to do so. So here I'm using Chrome, but any browser will do. It's really just a matter of preference. Right. And when you do log in as a user, for the most part, you're going to be logging in to your homepage like this, which is a dashboard. So very useful for, especially in construction. The moment you log in, you're going to be able to see all of your important metrics around your projects. If you wanted to track your costs, see how you're tracking against your estimates in a more admin type KPI, and we saw this on the video too. You can keep track of, let's say, the number of issues that they're currently still open, and if you have a baseline that you want to keep there, you can change the color coding depending on how you want it. Right, so all sorts of graphical representations that you can have, especially around finance, which is important. So
and this is customizable, Marion. So these
yep.
dashboards are customizable, right?
Yeah, fully. So you can have it. You can, in theory, you can have a dashboard for each person that logs into the system. And that's something that you're going to be working with Endeavor on when you do start this process, where they will help you identify like the sorts of dashboards that you need, and then the system allows for personalization as well. So if, let's say, each project manager that you have within the company wants to view this a different way, so you can copy the same one, and then they can have their own personal copy that they've tweaked according to how they want. And the UI itself is fairly easy to use. It's not you're not gonna need to be a developer to do it. So
and if you've got multiple companies, can you have these dashboards across all of those different entities, or how does that work?
Yeah, definitely. So just to explore this a little bit, so this is actually important especially for if you're a land developer, because as you know, it's common for them to
have a few different ones.
To incorporate each site that they build as a different company. So you can have that all in your single what we call an instance of MYOB Advanced, and then the data itself, you can have that shared dashboards, so a consolidated view of all your financial information, but then have filters as well. So if you wanted to filter down to a specific site or a specific project, you can do that as well in the system.
Very good.
Awesome. So just quickly around like what we're seeing here on the screen. So if you notice on the left here, I have a bunch of modules. It's essentially all of the modules that are available with Advanced, and that's because my user's a full administrator user. Now this is role tailored as well. So depending on what your user's license is, you can be limited to viewing, let's say, just the construction specific stuff or just the financial modules. And again, that's all very configurable in the system. Right. Searching for the screens on here, you just jump into each module. Alternatively, you can search for things on the search bar on here. So let's say if I try profit, it's going to show me everything that I have that says profit on it. Right? So just an easy way to, especially when you're moving into a new system, that learning curve, if you shorten that for your people.
And that's a global search, right, Marion? So if you wanted to search by a reference or by a supplier or subcontractor, it will search
phone numbers as well, email. So if I type, let's say, MEP here, there's one of my customers, it's going to show me all of my active projects under that name too. So it's a fairly powerful tool. Yep. So even email addresses. So you can envision it as like someone on the phone, or someone who's taking emails, quickly just checking if this person is actually a customer of ours already. Right. So those simple things, those little things that add up, we try to help with as much as we can. Right. Now let's go into the core of what we wanted to discuss now, which is projects. Right. So one of the things that the dashboard does too is provides a drill down. It allows you to drill down to the actual documents. If I click on one of the projects here, actually opens up the record for me immediately. So you don't have to go through a whole menu path for you to be able to access just a single project. So again, it's just one of those usability things that really helps out a lot. And when you do open up a project, So we were talking about how Advanced will become your core financial system for your projects. And if you look at the open up the project, it actually shows you immediately how you're tracking against it. So how much you've spent, how much revenue generated from it, what margins what your current margin rate is. And so if you're tracking like a certain percentage that you want to keep, so that's just a good way for you to identify that. Right now, the project itself, so a lot of the settings here can be templatized, right? So we have the ability to use templates. So the way it usually flows is that on the system too, we have what we call a project quote, or this can be your proposal or your quote to your customer. And that in itself can integrate to estimating tools like, say, ProEst. If you're doing your estimating manually, you can actually upload like your bill of quantities into that quote, be able to track that, and it integrates with our CRM system too. So essentially, keep track of your pipeline, right before you convert that into a project. So at that point, you can use the template already, and then once the project gets the go ahead, it's just a matter of converting that quote into a project like this, and everything else will be captured, right? So that includes how you want to bill it. So you can set a default of how you want to build your project. So whether it's a time and material engagement, a progress-based billing, if you're doing cost plus, so you can do that in the system. And we'll go a little bit deeper into that when we look at how we break down the project, right? So we're able to do retentions as well. It can be a fixed retention rate. So let's say in this case, it's just 5% across the whole lifetime of the project. But we can do contract caps as well. So if you're only charging retentions, let's say for the first 1 million or for the first $500,000, you can do that too. And we can use steps. So say if you want to charge a different retention rate as the project progresses,
with thresholds.
Yeah, you can do that. Right. Now, one of the things that the template predefines for you are what we call the project tasks. So this is essentially how you break down your project or your work breakdown. So you can have it like this, where it's broken down to the different specs. And Leo alluded to this earlier, where each task on there, you can actually tweak how you want to bill it, right? So we had a progress claim type setup as for the whole project, but individually you can actually change this to different billing types. One practical application of that is, I know usually when you're building for house building, you have your progress billing while you're building the structure itself. But for the finishing, like the interiors and things like that, where customers have lots of choices in terms of how they want to finish the house, that usually becomes a cost plus engagement, where you charge like a fixed fee on top of what the material costs are. So you can have that as a separate line on here, and all of your billing will be automated based on what the costs of the actual purchases are. So again, those things that simplify your tracking of your costs and your billing, we have in the system. Right. So for certain aspects of the project too, where you would want to keep track of your work in progress, so you can do that, and that automatically gets recognized as an asset for your company until
so it will sit on the balance sheet. So everything that you've got as a work in progress will go to the balance sheet, right? Whilst it's work in progress. Yep.
That's correct. And again, the moment you bill it, automatically that gets cleared out. So you essentially turn that into revenue for you. Right. So another aspect of that, so from that estimate, it actually flows into your cost budgets here. Right. So as you can see, it's broken down according to however you designed your task. So one thing that one way that I've seen it broken down to is according to lots. So if you're a land developer, you can break it down for each lot, and that's important because you would want to have that profitability for each lot that you actually develop, right? Or you actually build.
Yeah, or for other people in other construction industry, I suppose any stage of a project, you want to be able to track profitability, cost, and budget. Then you would set up that task, I would imagine, to
different phases. Yep.
Yes. Yep. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, and yeah, further down to that, you can break it down to cost codes. So you can have predefined cost codes in the system. You can have what we call multiple segments of that. So if you want to have like further breakdown of your costs, you can do that in the system. So it just makes your reporting, if you wanted to get more granular in terms of your reporting, you can
easily
do
a subtask, right? So you essentially are adding a subtask to the high level task. Yeah.
That's right. And then you can define what sort of expense that is too. And the great thing about how this setup that we have called account group is it's tagged to the specific account. So there, it's not what tends to happen with construction companies is someone someone delivers some materials on site, a subcontractor finishes the work, get sign off, the person on the field will have to call the office, get it tagged to the correct code, get it tagged to the correct account. So in advance you can predefine those, so you can quickly identify that a particular customer is an expense for a particular subcontractor should land in this on a particular natural account, and the project account, the project itself will be able to capture that to the correct cost. So there's no manual intervention that you need to do to get that posted.
So it's like grouping things for you to see a balance, right, of where things are.
Right. And so obviously you're going to be able to set what your original budgeted amount is. So if you look at the report here, so we have a number of columns here that help you keep track across the life cycle. So if you have, once you have your original budget, you can track against what the actual costs are. I actually hid some of the columns here, which you can do for most tables in advance, because there's really a bunch more on there. So if, let's say, if you want to keep track of what your projections are, which we'll see later on, if you want to keep track of the change orders, so what the budget is. So again, this allows, as Leo mentioned, that you're able to segregate what your original budget is from what your variations are. So you can do that, and you can do that quickly on here.
And also including the commitments. I think a lot of companies always have a bunch of purchase orders open and want to see how that actually impacts if they had to add that to their actuals, and kind of what does that picture look like, right? So I can see on the screen one of your columns has got that committed in there as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Now the flip side of that too is the revenue budget. So obviously, depending on how you want to build your customer. So in this case, since we're doing more a progress billing type engagement, so each spec on there, I have my percentage completion. So that then determines how much I'm going to be billing. So let's say for a certain spec here, I decided that I've completed more. I can just set that, and then it tells me how much I'm about to claim next.
That's excellent. So that's that gap, right? So you had a variance there, now an extra 10% has been completed, and that now automatically tells you that needs to be invoiced out, right?
Yep. And again, that's an automated thing in the system. Once you run the invoicing, it's going to capture that, and depending on how you want to structure like your claim report to the customer, you can do that in the system.
Excellent. Yep.
Okay. So the next thing I'd like to cover now is around commitments. So you're talking about how it's important for especially for bigger projects to keep track not just of what your actuals are, but what you still expect to pay. Right now, in the system we have commitments. You can keep commitments in two ways. One is through a purchase order. So let's say for your materials, where you have to receive the product before you actually pay the bill out to the customer, or through a subcontract. Right. So if I would open up an example of a subcontract here, so as you can see, all of the work that your subcontractor does, you can assign it to a specific task into the project and a specific cost code, right? So all the costs on there you can maintain. As I mentioned, we do have retentions for your suppliers as well, or for your subcontractors as well. And if you needed to generate a report, you can quickly do that on the subcontractor screen here. And so if you needed to email that to your subcontractor, you can do that out of the system too. Now, as the bills start pouring in for that subcontract, you can keep track of all of them here too. We can keep prepayments as well. So if you needed to provide a prepayment before they actually do the work, you can do that in the system.
Yep, that's very relevant, I reckon. Yep.
Compliance as well. So if there are any certifications, common use for this is site inductions. So just to keep track, to make sure that before your subcontractor starts working, that they've done the most recent induction that you do on site, because you know how that expires, and maybe they're coming into work without really. So that's just a good way to keep track of it.
Is it easy to attach things onto there? So I mean, is it a drag and drop function to just attach things?
Yep, definitely. So if you have a file, it's just a matter of dragging it to the screen, and it appears on your attachments. Fantastic. On there. Yeah. Okay. So on this section too is where you're going to be viewing your lien waivers. So at the time the work is completed, you have your bill. So depending on whether your deed of release or your lien waiver is based on the final payment or the final completion of work, So once you generate that, you can keep track of it here. So if let's say if there are any disputes, anytime you can quickly say that hey, we've sent it to you, you sent it back to us, you see you signed the lien waiver, so there's really no claim for you to do anymore. Right. Now another source. So we've talked about subcontractors, so essentially paying people to do your work. Let's talk about how, let's say if you have your own staff that do the work, like which is common for, let's say, home builders, where you have your on-site on-site foreman, your staff on site, and you can enter your time into the system directly too. So it's done through, one way is through a time card like this. So if they have a laptop available, you can enter the time card like this, where you enter as if you've done work for different projects within that week. You can break it down on here. But the easier way is actually do it on a mobile device. So you can either enter that as a per task thing, where the moment you finish a task that you did, say it took you 2 hours, you enter that, and that gets tracked back to the project. Or do enter the time card through the app as well.
Sure.
Right. Now, if I go back to my project here, just quickly regarding that, those what we call activities or your time cards. So it all comes up on here. So now, as a project manager, if you want to check your people's hours for that specific project, it all gets broken down on there. So all of
You'll have a flow there of everything, right? Every
yeah.
email, every time it gets captured, invoices that go out. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So it's really effectively a dashboard for you for that project, right? Now, as all of the work is getting done, if you want to keep track of your finances, we have a balances tab within the project. So it's effectively a balance sheet already. So we're seeing here, let's say, all of your costs from your labor, from the materials you've purchased, tracking the performance against what you had budgeted. If you were tracking work in progress too, you're bound to see a line on here that says WIP. That keeps track of how much how big your current asset is, right, in terms of your work in progress. Right. Now let's go to a little bit around the more project management type solutions that we have around the project. So the first one I'd like to talk to you about is our change requests. So as as Leo mentioned, in any project there's bound to be variations, right? So there's no such thing as perfect project, and having a system for you to automate and to streamline that workflow really helps. So the first step in that is what we call a change request. So as let's say an engineer or a site supervisor, you can enter a change request, tag, let's say, how much impact it will have in terms of time, but more importantly, how much impact it will have to your budget, right? And again, if you look at the structure, it's all fairly similar to what we've been seeing with the project, with the subcontractor. So it's really tracking it through a specific project task, entering the costs on there, and then you can set up an approval the structure within the system. So you can email this out of the system as well, so any stakeholders can receive notification of it. And then we can set up an approval. Let's say the project manager needs to approve it. If you have an overall, like a program manager or a general manager that would like to approve any change requests, so you can do that before it can get converted into what we call a change order, right? So the change order itself what will impact the project in terms of the budget. So everything that we were seeing a while ago in terms of your cost budgets, that's gonna get updated the moment you create that change order.
So it's initially a change request. Somebody says there's a request, they kind of do the estimating for it, what's going to be the impact budget cost wise, and then somebody can approve it, right? And becomes an actual change order. And only then does it go onto the project, correct?
Yep, that's correct. Right. So one way that we can originate that from, or one transaction, is what we call let me just try to tweak this around so I can see my screen better. Let me just open this quickly. Right. So one way we can trigger that change request process too is what we call our project issue. So if there's a particular issue, let's say something got broken, there was an incident on site that happened that will cause delays, you can track that all through a project issue and then convert that into a change request. So you have that full workflow of the things that happened that led to that actual variation to the project. So if you wanted to do a further analysis of, let's say, why did we overshoot our budgets, you can substantiate all of that with the information that you have in the system, right? So other than that, we can raise requests for information as well. So if any stakeholder has a question, you can keep track of it, of the answer to that too, and you can assign that to a specific user that will know the answers. If you have a question to the engineer, you can do that easily, right?
Yep. Excellent.
Yeah. So we're able to track drawing logs and photo logs as well. So any sort of drawings that you want to keep track of, you can store that in the system. So photos as well, specifically for photos, you can actually send that to, you can actually use your phone to take the photo. So on site, just take a quick photo and that's gonna appear on the back end here too, right? Now, in terms of any changes to, so we've covered a little bit around how the operation goes. I'd like to cover now how we can then do our reporting, right? So before we go to actually see the report, I'd like to open up first how we're able to do cost projections. So in a project, again, you're never always spot on against the budget as much as you want to, right? And then doing cost projections like this is just a way for you to then better estimate what you need to spend and what you're going to end up spending at the end of the project. So when you start a cost projection in the system, it's going to show you how much you're tracking in terms of what your budgeted cost is. But then it allows you to tweak it through this field on here. Let's say, for example, if I was saying that my budget is saying that I'm at 80% of my progress already, but then you identify that it's really I'm only at 50 or 60% of the work that I need to actually do. You can set that on here, and then it gives you a projection of what your total cost to complete is
to
still.
do some ballpark numbers, right? So if you're a project manager, you need to give some ballparks around cost completion. You can tweak some of those percentages and come up with that number.
Which is an important metric to show to your customer too. And the great thing about this is once you have that on, you can then feed this back to the project. So on the project itself, you're going to see that, oh, this is my new projection now. This is what I still need to spend to complete the work. Another way to break down your budget is through a forecast, right? So we were talking a while ago about being able to manage your cash flow across the life cycle of a project, especially for those longer term projects. So this is just a way to do it. So each element on your budget, you can see it broken down according to each period. So, and you can tweak that as you expect. So as you know, there's no real, especially for those longer projects, some of the material costs you don't want to purchase up front. You don't want materials sitting in your job site early, so you purchase them to be delivered just when you need them. This is a way to represent that better in terms of when you actually need to pay people, to pay your suppliers. Right now, so all of that information, the system makes it easy to summarize them all into a report. So we've seen how we can represent it in a more dashboard form, but you can do it in more standard reporting form like this. So for each project, keeping track of everything that you've all of the revenue that earned, what you've billed. So by billed, you can set this to mean that what you've actually sent out in terms of your invoice or even the claims that you've submitted. So we have that pro forma invoice that you said that has no impact to your finances yet, and then keep track of all of the other metrics that you want to keep track of. So again,
and these reports you can obviously drill into the detail, right? So you've got those hyperlinks all over the place where you could go into the underlying information.
And again, fully configurable. So I was talking a while ago about, so by default, this is showing you what you've invoiced, right? But if you want to show what you've claimed, so you can easily change that into the report too.
Yep.
Right. And so again, you can have it if you prefer you can have it on a dashboard like this, where it's more dynamic. It's easier to view really your top line numbers.
Awesome.